Hi, everybody, New Mexico, Connecticut. Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm so happy to have William Wallace joining us. I always want to say Will the Wallace because that's his Instagram handle. You want to go over there and follow him. Check him out. He's dropping some serious information bombs in the supplement science world, and he's just an awesome guy. So welcome, Will. Will's a PhD supplement formulator and ingredient scientist, and he works with the brand Life Extension. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Life Extension. So Will, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You got me early enough. I haven't been accepting requests to do these since I started my dissertation, but you had asked me before I started, so you got me just in time.
Thank you. Honestly, I'm really honored. I jumped in on one of your lives with Compound Solutions, and what a wealth of knowledge you are. Like, honestly, it was just really empowering to listen to you and to get the facts, and the way you explained things was really tangible. So I know you're going to add some huge value tonight to all of this. There's so much misunderstanding and just people aren't clear, and I would love just to have, anything you want to drop tonight, please drop away. We're really honored to have you here.
Right.
But let's jump in, and then everybody that's here joining us, you can also, we'll got time for some questions at the end, so feel free, just hold out till the end and we'll hit the questions. So we're gonna just dive right in. Top supplements for, and then I've got a whole bunch of things here listed for Will to dive in with. But if we look at supplements or even ingredients, because as you guys know, supplements are formulated with specific ingredients. So I'm just going to ask Will to highlight some of his top ingredients for brain health.
All right. So I think before we start, I think it is important to plant it for everybody. A supplement, which is something you might want to define first. And basically a supplement is anything that you add to something to enhance it. That doesn't have to be necessarily mutually exclusive to dietary supplements, though I know that we all kind of make that connection right off the bat. So there are several things we could do to supplement for brain health, and maybe we could start at dietary supplements, and if we happen to venture off into other types of supplementation for anything else, then so be it. But I think one of the big ones that's underappreciated but highly used is caffeine. Caffeine alone, but caffeine also in the form of tea and coffee for the obvious reasons that it's providing, non-nutrient compounds in the form of polyphenols, which are highly beneficial to brain health. However, caffeine by itself does do a couple things. It is melatonin sparing because one of the same enzymes breaks down both melatonin and caffeine, and melatonin has several health benefits, specifically for mitochondria, which are highly important to long-term brain health. In addition to that, caffeine does also actually positively stimulate the vagal nerve. If people know anything about the pathology of neurodegenerative diseases, the vagal nerve starts to atrophy over time. And then you start losing communication between certain organs, specifically the gut. And when there's a dysregulation there tends to be declines in not only cognitive function, but all of the structures involved in maintaining that function. So caffeine, but recommended in the form of tea and coffee. And while we're talking about polyphenols in general, polyphenols from anything else, so blueberries, apples, things of that nature, which you can also find in extract form pretty readily. Resveratrol is a very popular one that most people know about. There's actually even a study published earlier this year, I believe, where they looked at older men and women, and they found that people that weren't necessarily taking dietary supplements, but were consuming polyphenols in the form of berries, apples, and tea, I believe, the people with the highest the highest total consumption of those things per month had the lowest risk for something like Alzheimer's disease. So you can supplement with those things in the form of a nutraceutical, or you could just supplement extra apples and berries and tea to your diet. And I think in that particular study, what they had ranked or what they had stated a high polyphenol intake was something like 20 cups of tea a month, 8 apples a month, and then around 8 cups of berries a month. So you look at very simple things you can do for long-term brain health. It could really be as simple as eating 1 cup of berries and 1 apple twice a week and having 1 cup of tea a day. And you're already ahead in terms of protecting yourself long-term comparatively to most people that aren't doing those things. But again, you can also get those things pretty readily in supplemental form as well. So for that reason, I love polyphenols. I love caffeine for brain health. And let's jump into these ones really, really quick, because you also want to provide your brain what's essential for its structure and then its function as well. So we have underappreciated nutrients like choline. And I talk about this one a reasonable amount on my page because it's a highly underappreciated nutrient. And there's more and more research coming out all the time suggesting that people, especially women in places like the UK, in Canada, and the United States, aren't receiving their RDA for choline. Choline is necessary for several things, but some of the most important are actually providing the substrate for the structural integrity of brain cells and other lipid membranes throughout the body, as well as the breakdown into neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, which are essential for not only memory formation and retention, but recallability as well. So for that reason, things like choline in the form of alpha GPC or CDP choline, which are highly bioavailable, as well as something like acetyl-L-carnitine, which helps to boost acetylcholine in the brain, and then something like phosphatidylserine as well, which is a really important part of the inner membrane of neural cells as well. So we could go on all day about things that are beneficial for brain health. But for me, I love polyphenols and I love choline and choline derivatives.
Oh my gosh, so much. Yes, you're killing it. The choline, I actually started supplementing with alpha GPC earlier in my pregnancy, just making sure I was hitting my choline intake. And from a food standpoint, I just bumped up like my egg yolk, yolk intake. So super interesting. And then I was going to ask you, I think the study on polyphenols with the berries I read as well. I'm recalling something different with the female brain and men's brain. The study, women's brains were responding better to the polyphenols, and the difference of Alzheimer's with respect to female and male brains.
Yeah, you have things like obviously women go through different biological processes throughout their life, including menopause, and menopause leaves women specifically susceptible to all kinds of things. Typically it's associated with things like bone loss, bone mineral density loss, but there are also concerns about changes in the brain. And actually, now that you say that, I remember a study where the researchers looked at something like resveratrol in the brain of aged female rats. And I know that rats aren't humans, but our brains are actually pretty similar in terms of their makeup, so it's a reasonably good model. And resveratrol was pretty potent in its ability to actually keep synapses, which is the spot where neurons speak with one another, to keep them functioning healthy at an old age.
Wow. And that was in like supplemental form then?
That was in supplemental
form. How, like a dosage for something like that? Like, is it dose specific, or just getting any in is better than you're seeing improvements in that and then getting none?
Now, most things are going to be dose specific. In some cases, getting something is better than getting nothing. When it comes to something like polyphenols, also dosing, we have to be careful with dosing because too much can be a bad thing as well, because they function in a way, we call it hormetically, which
Right.
means a little bit stimulates a positive response, but a lot actually leads to a rather large negative response. So something like resveratrol is typically, and depending on the model and the delivery form, because resveratrol itself, and honestly most polyphenols, they don't have very good bioavailability. So they anywhere between 2 and 20%, depending on the actual compound, but most of them hang around in the 10% area in terms of how much of the parent compound reaches systemic circulation unaltered. Now, resveratrol it's interesting because there's a theory that it exerts a lot of its beneficial effects in the gut because the gut microbiome utilize it, and obviously you have that interaction with the gut and the brain. And so in one theory is that, okay, that is one of the primary reasons for how resveratrol exerts its positive effects. But also you have other theories, like when resveratrol gets into the bloodstream, even though it's broken down into other compounds, some of those compounds can make a conversion back to its parent compound, resveratrol, and then it can possibly reach the brain that way. So people have, when you're taking it in supplemental form, because it has low perceived bioavailability, you have you can find it in nanoparticle form and liposomal form. So I don't think anybody would really argue that increasing its bioavailability is a bad thing. I think in most cases that would be a good thing. So going with a supplement that uses an enhanced form of delivery, like in a liposome, a phytosome, or nanoparticles for something like resveratrol or other polyphenols,
Yeah.
can be pretty beneficial. Resveratrol is typically dosed, I mean, in research, it's really anywhere from 75 milligrams, at least in people, all the way up to a gram. But most times you're going to see positive effects in the 500 milligram to 1,000 milligram or 1 gram range.
Okay. No, super valuable. Thank you. Thank you. Back to the caffeine. If I could ask you, just an anhydrous form, then that's just straight up, like you said, coffee or tea, or straight up just caffeine.
Yeah, basically. I'm going to switch. I keep bouncing back and forth between my computer and my phone, but I'm going to stare at my computer. So, but yeah, straight caffeine anhydrous can have benefit on its own. Like I said, I think, most people would agree that having it in tea or coffee form is what's best. But if you have a synthetic version in the form of caffeine anhydrous, then that also can have positive effects, like I said earlier, either through being melatonin sparing or positively stimulating something like the vagal nerve.
Okay, amazing. Those of you who just jumped on or joined us, we're just talking about supplements, or like food and or specific supplements that are going to make an impact on brain health. And these are some of Will's top suggestions and recommendations. Absolutely awesome. I also love that you've acknowledged food. I think that's the most important part. Obviously, like the nutrition that we put in our body, no supplement can take the place of actually putting food in our bodies, and that food is medicine. And I love that you've acknowledged that as well, is that, we do need to look at foods, and if we could, polyphenols and berries, I mean, absolutely, right? All the incredible research on antioxidants, yet we frantically go onto our computer searching for the next miracle pill. And that's obviously not the approach to take.
Right. Yeah. Right. And actually, while we're there, before we move forward, an obvious one is, I really just always kind of overlook it because it seems so obvious to me off the bat, but something like DHA or higher doses of omega-3s, because the brain is the primary dumping ground for omega-3. So while we're talking about diet, if you're not getting enough fatty fish or things of that nature that contain omega-3s, and then DHA is something also highly beneficial to supplement with.
Wow. Awesome. For brain. Liquid, or, like, do you have a preference with respect to potency and form,
I mean, it really depends on the company and how they manufactured it, and how they store it. It doesn't really matter whether it's in liquid form or capsule form, as long as you know that you're getting it from a good source.
Nice.
And typically, the good companies out there, they'll have their testing results of their material as public information that you can go and look at. Obviously, I work for Life Extension, so I'm biased towards this, but just because I know exactly what goes into those supplements, so that's what I use. Also, I get those really cheap, so but that's a good product. So and I know that, but also, you can request from these companies the testing results from their batches and things like that, and you can actually look and see what the quality of their product is.
Wow, super cool. That's awesome. I found I love Barleans for the oils, just high potency, a tablespoon, and you're right at that gram of EPA, DHA combined. They have flavors. They do use, they use a sugar alcohol in there, I think, to sweeten it up. So it's nice to throw in your yogurt and things like that. But potency, right? If you're trying to hit a target EPA, DHA, and then you have to take, half the bottle of the brand, I'm not going to drop brand names, but, something you got at a discount warehouse, not all supplements are created equal. And I know we're going to jump into that later too. So
right, totally. DHA also has pretty low bioavailability, so depending on the brand and the form, you may have to take a higher amount. But also, it does help if you have the ethyl ester form, which most commercial products are. Then having that with a meal should increase the bioavailability, because it's emulsified in the gut and then absorbed as fatty acids and glycerol through bile acid dependent lipases, meaning bile acid needs to be secreted and these enzymes come with it to emulsify the fats in the intestines. So if you eat a meal, then you'll secrete the bile acids and the lipases with them. So that does, you're having your omega-3s with the meal does help to increase their bioavailability.
Okay. I mean, I know probably all of us have had that, where you don't have a meal, you throw back your fish oil, and you're like literally like burping it up all day long. Yeah. There's that fish oil. Awesome. Wow. Thank you. That was so much on brain health. Amazing. Thank you. Let's jump into immune support. This is a hot one right now, I think, with coronavirus blowing up and everyone starting to think hopefully more about their health and their immunity. We would love to hear your thoughts on supplements based on building immune system.
Yeah, when all this COVID stuff started happening, immune supplements was pretty much anybody saying anything about them. It was a pretty hot take, just because you have some people now looking at it as an opportunity to either, one, educate on potential immune boosting supplements, or companies that are trying to push immune boosting supplements. And then you have other people in the field who may or may not be experts, and then they're either for or against immune boosting supplements, saying that, oh, all of these are garbage, you can't actually boost your immune function, blah 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 blah. And they're really just and so I had some thoughts on it, and I remember posting a very lengthy post about it at the time, and really everybody was just getting very involved in the semantics of how these things are promoted. But with the immune system and supplements, I would agree that you can't really boost your immune function, at least not past baseline. Now, if your immune system is suffering in function, then yeah, it would make sense that improve its function and in essence boost it. But you can always support your immune system. Your immune system I mean, it's really comprised of a bunch of different cell types that are involved in several different biological reactions that all require different vitamins and nutrients and cofactors in order to effectively continue to perform all of these actions. So if you're under a state of stress, be that just general stress and anxiety, or if you're fighting a viral infection, then all of these nutrients and substrates are being used up by your immune system to help just maintain your standard biological function.
Wow.
So when it comes to that, there's really it's not a very exciting answer. But you want to look at all of your basic vitamins and minerals, everything from A, B, C, D, E, over to things like selenium, which is a mineral, and then cysteine, which is an amino acid, which eventually makes its conversion into glutathione, which is a cofactor for one of your body's main antioxidant enzymes. So you want to constantly be providing nutrients to the body because your body constantly needs them. You don't just want to supply them when you need them. You want to provide them because they're always needed. So when it comes to immune function, it really is best to just keep on top of the standard A, B, C, D, E, and then all of your minerals with that as well. Zinc, another important mineral.
Right. It's something like a multivitamin then, like, obviously nutrition, it comes back to nutrition, but just supplementing with a multivitamin, like a good sort of insurance policy to follow if you're using a quality supplement.
Yeah, and so multivitamins can be very, very useful. And I do think that many people would benefit from their use, particularly in terms of just general health and experiencing less cold days or less sick days, something like that. But I do not think that everybody needs to take a multivitamin every day. Actually, I would argue that most people who are generally healthy, like yourself, for instance, probably wouldn't need to take a multivitamin every day. And in some instances, that may be more detrimental to your health than helpful. So I think for people that are really on top of everything else and have a good nutrition, they exercise frequently, they sleep well, I think that a multivitamin, really depending on what your nutrition looks like, and then you can also get blood work to look at these things as well, but anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week might be sufficient for really most people that are already generally healthy, because you don't want to overload your system with these things either. You provide enough in sufficient amounts, but like everything, it really is balanced, because not only is more useless, it can potentially be harmful.
Wow, right. Again, right? Food is medicine. If we just eat well and, we focus on the intake of what we're actually eating, everyone right now, well, for the last handful of years, macros, it's like, don't forget about your micros, right? Your all those antioxidants. Oh my gosh, there's so much more to it than just hitting macro targets, right? Every single day. I speak from the athlete that started my fitness journey on 6 meals of chicken and asparagus and a little bit of rice every day. That was all I was allowed to eat. So
that's where everybody starts their fitness.
Right. And then we learn the hard way, I guess. Yeah. So no, thank you. Amazing. Pre-workout, jumping into energy for there we go. Energy for before workout. I mean, I know you mentioned caffeine, and that's been one of my favorites over the years. Just trying not to take overstimulating and tanking my adrenals. And I've also been that athlete, straight up, not gonna lie, that you start to get hooked on. You take a fat burner and then you've got to go back at 5 o'clock for another session. So you hit another pre-workout, and next thing you know, handful of cups of coffee through the day, you're sitting around 700-800 milligrams of caffeine intake. And it's just a disaster on your sleep, on everything. Everything starts to fall apart. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on pre-workout ingredients and just using straight up caffeine.
Yeah, so we'll start with caffeine, because obviously, I mean, that's the big one. Everybody uses caffeine for the most part. And especially for working out, I mean, what's the things that stick around the longest, like caffeine, creatine, beta alanine, there's a reason that they've been around for so long, because they're the few things that have consistently shown to work over time. Caffeine obviously providing more acute benefits, or creatine and beta alanine need to be taken in certain doses for longer periods of time. But with caffeine, and I've experienced this myself, as I'm sure many people who see this have, you can get lost in your intake very quickly if you're not being mindful of it. So like you said, like you take a pre-workout, you're not paying attention to the 300 milligrams of caffeine in that. And then later on in the day, you have a cup of coffee, and then maybe, if you're heavily in the fitness industry and you're dieting for whatever reason, maybe you're taking a fat burner as well. And fat burners are never absent of caffeine, because I can tell you firsthand that there's nothing that's really going to burn fat quite like you want it to that's legal. So
yeah.
those things are never absent of caffeine.
In the USA, anyway. In Canada, we have ephedrine that's still legal. So
it's still legal in Canada? I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's the craziest potent stack ever, right?
Okay, well, there you go. The Canadians have it then. But we have some things that Canadians don't either. We can sell hormones and they can't. So. But caffeine, so it's very important to be mindful of caffeine, definitely. I find it helpful. Like, I always have in the back of my head how much caffeine I have in a day. And I even give myself like weekends where I know that I don't have a lot going on. I try not to have any caffeine at all, because I like to make do with the smallest effective dose, right? But obviously, not everybody can do that. And, we need more things than caffeine that can supply us with energy, because that's one of the primary functions of a pre-workout, is just straight energy production. Right. So try to give everybody something that's a little bit more useful and exciting than, just tapering their caffeine dose. I know that there's a lot of pre-workouts that contain ingredients that, people will recognize, things like hegemine and methyltyramine. They tend to be like a lot of big words that people may not know what they are, but they might recognize in some of the more hardcore pre-workouts that are hanging around on the market.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to talk about those, and like, I'm unable to recommend things like that, even though they work wonderfully as stimulants, because technically those aren't legal supplements, and they're on the FDA's warning list. So I would never formulate with them. And companies that have those things on the market now, it's only a matter of time before they get pulled off the shelves. So they are relatively potent. Nobody knows anything about their, any potential safety issues in humans. So
wow.
Yes. What else can you use besides caffeine to give yourself energy? That's like the toughest thing in the world, is finding a non-stim energy booster, because when you just look at the straight definition of a stimulant, it's anything that increases physiological or nervous activity. In that regard, anything that provides you with energy is going to be probably, at a minimum, increasing metabolism somewhere in the body, which would fall under a definition of a stimulant. So really, people will say like, this is a non-stim whatever pre-workout, and if it's meant to provide you with energy, and it does, it has to have some kind of stimulatory property in there. But things that are safer stimulants that we can use, that may even allow us to wean off of caffeine and take in lower doses of caffeine, it could be simple things like amino acid therapy. For instance, something like tyrosine, providing us with substrate for dopamine synthesis and other catecholamines downstream that are important for increased attention, awareness, and energy levels, like epinephrine and norepinephrine.
Right.
So substrates for those things, either tyrosine or L-dopa from Mucuna pruriens, is the most common natural source. People might recognize L-dopa as a drug that's given to Parkinson's patients, which is the case. That's just a synthetic version, though it's the same thing. Mucuna pruriens is it's an herb based in Ayurvedic medicine, and a lot of people do find a lot of use for that in improving their energy levels and improving their libido, because obviously dopamine is highly involved in that. Even fertility, there's studies showing increased sperm health in men with higher doses of mucuna. But providing the substrate for things like dopamine, especially going into a workout, would be highly beneficial in most cases, because not only is dopamine necessary for stimulating nervous system activity, but it's highly implicated and plays a very big role in movement and just motor regulation in general. And that's why people with Parkinson's disease have tremors and an inability to control their motor function, is because Parkinson's disease is largely characterized by degradation of a dopaminergic system in a certain part of the brain, and they lack dopamine. So tyrosine, L-DOPA from mucuna pruriens, those things help. I know they help me, and I know they help a lot of other people in providing substrate for energy, and can be used well in conjunction with caffeine or as a standalone.
Okay. Are they, would those two ingredients will be something you would actually just purchase like standalone, or is there a formula out there that you like that you use that has everything in it that you would use? You would take those two things plus caffeine.
I tend to always, like, everything I buy for myself is pretty much always standalone, because I like to regulate the dosing myself. Also with something like mucuna, which is very close to dopamine, because L-DOPA is just one step before dopamine. Tyrosine is one step behind L-DOPA. Some people don't respond well to it. It can be a little overstimulatory for some people, or potentially spike their blood pressure, just depending on their sensitivity to those type of compounds. And
Right.
Genetics and other lifestyle factors can influence that. So when it comes to that one, I mean, it is generally recognized as safe, but for most people, it's wise to start on like the lower end of dosing for something like that. And it also, I mean, depending on where you're buying it from, you're going to see extracts with a standardization to a percent of L-DOPA. In some cases, it could be a 5% standardization. In some cases, 15. And in some cases, they don't tell you what the standardization is because it might not have one. In other words, you have no idea how much of the active ingredient is actually in that supplement. So it's important to be aware of, when you're buying a supplement, you don't need to worry about that with something like tyrosine, because it's a straight amino acid. You're getting that much tyrosine. But when it comes to something like mucuna, you want to make sure you know how much of the active ingredient you're getting, not just the herb. So those are important things to look out for on the actual label.
Right. And same with what you mentioned, just to kick off pre-workout subs. You said it can be really easy to lose track of our caffeine intake in a day, and also realizing that caffeine isn't, sometimes when you look at a label, it's not just going to say caffeine, it's going to say maybe anhydrous caffeine. It'll say maybe green coffee bean extract, green tea extract, right? Teacrine, and all of a sudden you're like, and then again, there's no specific dosing of each ingredient, and you don't really know, right? And what if you don't shake it up well enough and you take a scoop off the top? Like, there's so many factors to consider, and I think that's something super important. Like, you really do want to try your best to be more responsible with your caffeine intake.
100%. Like you said, it really does help to know if you're taking multi-ingredient formulas. And like you said, you have a lot of things like teacrine and dynamine and all these like caffeine derivatives or caffeine analogs or things that work very similar to caffeine.
Yeah.
You want to be able to keep track of those things, because it's highly important to know how much of something is going to be beneficial for you in the long run. So at least if you can keep in the back of your mind in a day, okay, I've had this much caffeine today, I can taper it back tomorrow, or I can have this amount every day and know that it'll be generally well tolerated, versus you get to a point where your intake is so high that now trying to cut back is just miserable, and your performance at work and in life just kind of starts to decline. And then you fall back into higher caffeine habits to make up for it.
The struggle is real. Like, when I had to actually come off caffeine when I first found out I was pregnant, I'd just come off the Olympia, and for those of you following it, my last fitness competition of my athletic career, kind of the World Fitness Championships. And I was like, trying to taper off because I definitely was over where I wanted to be on, and I was aware of that. It was impacting my sleep, my mood. And that's what happens, right? We start to take more and more and more and more. And I'm like, right after the Olympia, like I'm going to cut cold turkey. Well, I started to taper, headaches, like serious withdrawal symptoms. Then I find out I'm pregnant, and obviously the risks with taking too much caffeine when you're pregnant, low term birth weight babies, and all kinds of issues with development. And I'm like, okay, cutting. Oh my God. It honestly took me like almost a month to feel normal again, just having 1 cup of coffee a day. And my sleep, like it was very, very hard for me to fall asleep during that time period. And then like after I stuck with it, because I had to, because I have a little human growing inside of me, I have never slept better. I don't remember in the last decade actually sleeping better. All I have is 1 cup of coffee every single day. That's it, because that's what I can have. And I have to say, like, my mood, my sleep, like I dream every night. I have deep quality sleep. And I think as athletes, like that's what we need, right? Or if you're working out hard and you need the recovery, you need that deep sleep and that like central nervous system stimulation where you're physically so exhausted, but your brain is just like on fire. You can't come down.
That's true. And like you said, most times for people, more sleep equates to better health outcomes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just what I mean. You need more deep sleep to actually experience more positive emotions during the day.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know that I use that as motivation to keep my stimulant intake down in the day. Like I had 1 cup of tea this morning, and then I just wasn't paying attention. We were coming up this. I'm like, maybe I'll have a cup of coffee because I'm feeling a little drowsy, and I have to talk relatively fast. I'm a pretty slow talker by nature. And then I was just like, it's just too late. So I'm like, I can't let my sleep. I can't let my sleep suffer like that. It's motivation for me.
You're talking fast enough for all of us, Will. That's awesome. No, for real. The struggle is real. And you guys, you got to stick with it. If you're someone who's taken too much caffeine, just hold out because you will get there. You will adjust. It's really difficult. So stick with it. I think transitioning into fat burning, I wanted to mention a couple supplements, like, not to throw up brands, like both Will and I, we're not promoting brands at all. It's just looking at ingredients that are in formulas. I want to talk about a couple things that I really like. And I think I'd flipped you this one before. On Instagram. It's a time cognitive priming supplement, and it's actually, I had been using this before for pre-workout, but also I got such amazing energy from it. So I wasn't looking for like creatine or those type of pre-workout ingredients, but I was like, whoa, these are happy pills. Like I take them in the morning and I feel so great. And I was having these insane workouts. And sort of on this new sort of cognitive stimulant, energizing supplement line, brain focus matrix. Again, you don't know individual dosing. They're not giving you that. They're just giving you the total. But MCT, anhydrous caffeine, theanine, teacrine, ashwagandha, some things I cannot pronounce, but incredible. And I know you said potency could have been a little better on some of these things. But now the formulas that are on the market, it's kind of overwhelming because we go in and we don't know, like, well, should I spend? This was like $80, should I spend $80 on this? And there's so many different things that are crossing between pre-workout, fat burning, and also that cognitive kick that you get. That's not a huge drop. Yeah, there it is. There's the word, neurotropic. And but for those of us that don't, understand all of that, it's really overwhelming. So I wanted to mention that because I keep this one. This one's going to be dropped back in post baby, just in low dosages. But it was one of my favorites. But just your thoughts on those as well, is like the combination stuff that's out there right now, that they're not marketing this as a pre-workout, but that's actually, I pulled my pre-workout and I just was taking this on some days, depending what I'm doing. Not if I'm training legs, but if I'm going in to do a HIIT session, you know, like a cardio session or a lighter high rep lift, I was using something like that.
Yeah, so most people, I mean, like we started off talking about pre-workouts, and what most people look for in a pre-workout, really the primary function of a pre-workout is to provide energy, right? And then you have other functions like increasing blood flow and things of that nature. But um, nootropics, you know, or supplements that are targeted for improving cognitive function or cognitive energy, like it's all the same thing. It's really just things that either they act on certain systems where you're releasing a cascade of neurochemicals and other things, you know, that work to promote, like you said, like your happy pills,
Yeah.
like, you know, so, and
Like I'm
things like
always
that.
happy, but on that I
Yeah.
was like, I am super happy. Like everyone's getting hugs, and I mean, and like, yeah, it's an incredible, it's that cognitive, like, wow, my brain, it's that mental clarity and focus that you get from those ingredients.
So being somebody who is actually pretty well versed in like biochemistry and things like that, like I said, I don't buy really any multi-ingredient formulas.
Right.
I normally take things in isolation and put them together so I can control dosing on my own. But when I look at supplements like that, like I have no doubt that they are effective in terms of providing, like, say, energy, like they promote to. But when somebody like me looks at it, I just see a bunch of stuff thrown in together. It's
Yeah.
almost like when you take a, and I'm not by any means crapping on the brand because it works for people. If I took it, it would give me an energy boost, and I would be like, cool. But I liken it to being like, and I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn. I guess I just have experience here, like having a bunch of different chefs, and somebody served me a plate of food, and I have experience in fine dining
Yeah.
and meal setup. And somebody took a bunch of food and it's all really delicious food, but it's just crammed into a mishmash, and they put it in front of me. And I would be like, well, I have no doubt this tastes good, but what is it? You know, like what's the method? What's the logic? It's like, oh, it's just a bunch of food that tastes good. And you're like, well, that's nice, but you know, I guess depending on what you're promoting it for, that can either be a good thing or it can, you know, be part of a marketing gimmick. Like I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, I know that the supplement that you just held up, just to like a very like straight shot, is like when you say like, oh, this costs $80, like the first things that I look and see, I'm like, oh, well, I know that they have high costs on their packaging like right away, you know, because I know that the ingredients in that bottle, and
Yeah.
especially in the doses that are in it, probably don't really cost that much to actually like manufacture the pills.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you know, looks like
Yeah.
I have no doubt that it works, but is it efficient in terms of what you're getting for the price you're paying? And you know, my direct answer would be no, not necessarily. At the same time, you
Yeah.
know, you do have a lot of companies that they basically take ingredients that score high on keyword searches, like, oh, these are popular ingredients, and they just put them in the same supplement together. Whereas if I go in to make a supplement, you know, I'm researching things like, okay, how do these things complement each other from a molecular and a biological standpoint? Because at the same time, it's really fun to do that. You want to you want to create something smart. And then also you want to be able to educate on it. You don't just want to tell people, hey, take this because it'll give you energy. Although a lot of times that's kind of all people are really interested in,
Yeah.
is what is this going to do? But I do still think that it's very important for everybody to know why it is they do what they do, whether they're very interested in it or not. If you start to learn the why you're taking something instead of just what it is and what it's supposed to do, you know, then you create a level of mindfulness about the other things you do, and you start questioning, well, why am I taking this? Is it for my brain health? Is it just to stim me out? You know, is it for my workout? And if so, do I need this much energy for my workout? Am I training intensely for a reason? Or, you know, do I need to stim my brains out for what I'm about to go do? You know, I do think it's kind of like, there was a, you know, I think I was, God, I don't know. I was reading a theology, some PhD wrote a book on theology, and he basically said like, in terms of like people acting with morality, you know, it's important for us. We look at stories of heroes because it's important that we know how to act a certain way. But it's more important to learn why we should act a certain way.
Absolutely.
And I look at it being the same thing with these kinds of things. It's important to know what we're taking. It's also highly important to know why we're doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And do that. I think to look at your supplements, like I said, certainly my pregnancy was that experience for me where I went through and I just combed, right, everything that I'm taking. Why am I taking it? And I'm not a huge, by any means, supplement junkie, you know, like definitely the pre-workouts, the caffeine during my athletic days. But if you look what you just said, how you get, well, you said getting everything from our foods, like food, we can actually get so much from our food. We don't need to overtake, and to look at, well, why am I actually taking this? And if you're taking something for like a neurotropic, then do you need the pre-workout? Do you need the coffee too? Do you need, like, why are you taking so many things, right? I think it's really valuable to look at that. Fat burning, like everyone, right? It's just that these are the hot supplements. And food, right? Food, the types of foods we eat can cause fat storage, and the portions and the volume and the timing, right? But fat storage or fat burning as well. So I think supplements, like when we drop them in, it should be the last thing, right? Like it shouldn't be the first thing, like, well, what supplement do I need to burn fat? Like, let's take a look at what you're eating and your activity level as well.
100%.
Yeah. Fat burning, like, Will, I've always stuck with, like, you know, definitely what's like out there on science, like L-carnitine, fat metabolizing, and looking at things like that aren't stacking too many things, you know, where you're getting so potent from an energy standpoint, you're overstimulated. What are your thoughts on L-carnitine for improving fat metabolism?
I think it can be beneficial for most people. Now, are the outcomes really going to be that significant if someone's using it versus if they're not? I guess it depends on what to you is significant, right? When I hear the word significance, I think of scientific statistical significance, to which I say, no, it probably wouldn't be significant.
Right.
But, you know, at the same time, what's significant to me would be different from, say, a physique athlete who's trying to bring their body fat percentage from 6% to 5%. You know, the amount of body fat they're losing there, that might not register as significant on my scale. But on their scale, to pull in just get them over that tiny little hump that they have to get over, then maybe that would be the case. But because L-carnitine has so many other health benefits, then it's hard for me to sway somebody against that. If it's something they want to take, by all means, go ahead and take it. And I particularly like the acetyl form, just because it can enter the brain as well, and it still has biological effects on muscle tissue. So that might be a good one for general health. And if somebody does want to use it and see how it works for fat burning, then I wouldn't dissuade them from it.
Okay. Wow. Potency as well, and looking at different like forms, liquid versus capsules, and making sure, you know, you're taking a therapeutic dose of it.
Oh, L-carnitine, that's true. It does come in liquid quite often, doesn't it? I prefer to take it in capsule form, just because it's a lot easier to keep track of. Less of a pain in the ass. And typically standard dosing, especially if it's going to be the acetyl form, you're looking at typically 500 milligrams to a gram most per pill. But if you're looking at capsules, it's typically 500 milligrams. And something like that can be taken really anywhere from 500 milligrams, sometimes less, but 500 is normally the low end of dosing, up into, really depending on what you're using it for. I would think most people would see benefit between 500 milligrams and 2 grams, so 2,000 milligrams. If you're looking at giving it to people for certain conditions, like chronic conditions, then it's taken higher at times. But 500 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams is good for your average person who's generally healthy.
Okay. And any research at all post workout windows, like optimizing? I mean, the research I have read, maybe, and that could be outdated as well, it was like the therapeutic dose was higher, Will. It was like, but again, this could be like, that's why I'm asking you. It was like 1.5 grams pre and 1.5 grams post workout recommendations, and that was therapeutic dose, then.
And that was for L-carnitine?
Yeah, for fat, optimal, like for fat metabolism.
Metabolism, yeah. Yeah, there are protocols that have been used, and that is, I think that is older research where you're using, X amount pre and X amount post. Like I said, I don't remember the differences there being, massive, but most times, yeah, if people are using it from a fat burning standpoint, then I don't think it necessarily needs to be exactly pre and post workout, but dosing sometimes is split over the course of the day, typically into 2 doses, one more in the morning, and then either one, say, post workout, or generally more towards the afternoon or evening. So it's also, and that's a good point to bring up, is that depending on what ingredient you're taking, it might have efficacy when the dosing is split throughout the day. Taking something just once in the morning or just once at night might not confer all of its health benefits. So it's important to know which things are meant to be taken once a day versus what things are meant to be taken 2 to 3 times a day. And if a label says that, then it's, there's probably a reason that it says it somewhere. Really, I guess it depends on the company you're buying from, but if it's a reputable company, then there's a reason the label reads that way.
Okay, huge. On that time release, then, like a time release, something as simple as a vitamin C, is that actually, are you getting what you're buying, a time released formula like that?
Yeah, I guess it depends what the compound is. Something like vitamin C is not, to me, a time release on something like that isn't highly valuable, just because you can only absorb so much vitamin C in a day. Granted, depending on what you're doing, maybe you're using more and need more over the course of the day. But vitamin C, you have people putting it in liposomal delivery as well, and that doesn't really excite me either, because your body can absorb a pretty low, it's like 70 milligrams of vitamin C a day, and depending on what you're doing, you might use some and then, need to replace it. But I think about most of the supplements we have are 500 milligrams plus of vitamin C, whereas not that those don't provide other benefit, but they're not really providing a whole lot of extra benefit unless you're actually in need of the increased antioxidant activity.
Wow. 70 milligrams a day. Like, we need to eat food.
Yeah, it's not hard to get it through food.
No. Wow. Okay, super awesome. I'll jump in to recovery here to kind of close off the top ingredients on some of these, your favorite ingredients for outcomes. Recovery. What, everybody thinks of BCAAs. What are your thoughts on that?
To be honest with you, whey protein would be my top one, or really any type of protein. I'm allergic to dairy, so I can't do whey protein, but obviously you're not going to recover if you're not getting your protein needs. So we'll get the boring stuff out of the way. Protein, obvious one. Outside of that, like we said before, a supplement doesn't have to be a dietary supplement. So if you're working out, odds are you might need more sleep. So you might need to supplement an extra hour of sleep, either in the form of a nap or tack it on to the end of the night or something like that. Outside of that, I like taking things that actually decrease nervous system activity after a workout, because your body doesn't actually kick in. All of its anabolic processes don't really start until things like cortisol get lowered. And people hear the term the HPA axis, which is involved in your fight or flight response. It's not until those responses kind of calm down that all the anabolic processes in your body actually start to increase, and you get increases in insulin-like growth factor and things of that nature. So I like taking things that will calm me down, but not necessarily put me out, because I still have to work during the day. So things like glycine, ashwagandha, maybe a small amount of net magnesium post-workout really, I feel, help start to prime my body
Taper.
for its recovery.
Wow, awesome. No, totally. And then have a good meal with, get your protein in even through food, right? Like you'll hit all your aminos that way.
Right. That's the obvious one.
Yeah, brilliant. Um, no, crazy. That's awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To think about recovery, think about other things that you could actually be doing a better job of, like your sleep. Your sleep as a health coach. My goodness, I think the majority of my team on a weekly basis is not getting enough sleep, right? And that's something I'm constantly preaching is, minimum 8 hours. If you're training hard, you might need even more. My peak athletic career, I was sleeping like 10 hours was my sweet spot. So don't feel guilty about sleeping, and then don't start supplementing with, energy boosters, cognitive stimulants to pick you up when you really just need to go to bed and get some sleep.
Yeah, I think most people actually, it's been shown over and over again in scientific literature, is that most people, especially adults, overestimate the amount of sleep they get in a night by a lot of times overestimate by over an hour. So a lot of adults think they're sleeping anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a night, when in reality, they're probably really sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night. It takes you a while to go to bed at night. You wake up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, and then it takes you a little bit to go back to bed. And that time adds up, especially when a lot of us aren't going to bed as early as we should be. And we all have to get up to, get going with the daily grind. Most of us are averaging anywhere from 5 to 7 hours, when in an ideal world, we're at a minimum getting 7 to 8. But if we're training hard, maybe we need 8 to 9 or more.
Yeah, huge. Get your sleep, everybody, get your sleep. I know we've been going for over an hour here. I'm going to try to close up with a couple more questions for Will, and then open it up if anyone has questions as well. What should we look for when we're investing in a supplement? What would be your top hit list on things like that? Because it can be really overwhelming.
That's true. It can be. I think for starters, the most important answer for that, or the top answer to that, is depending on the individual, you need to assess your needs. You actually need to understand, again, this goes back to why are you taking what you're taking? Don't just take something because your best friend threw it at you and said they like it and it works for them. Be like, well, do I even need this? If you lack energy, then do you need more caffeine, or do you need to find a replacement for caffeine, in order to taper down off caffeine and, thus promoting better energy long term? Or do you have poor sleep and you need something to actually help get you to sleep sooner at night and then sustain that sleep throughout the night? It's just really important to know what you need as a person, because that helps you understand why you're doing what you're doing. Do you have high homocysteine levels? And okay, now you need more B12 and more folate. So the top things that I look for, if we're just talking about me, I have to assess my individual needs first off. But then secondly, I always, and this is just who I am and how I am, I have to go and make sure that an ingredient has some sort of relevant science behind it, because I can't just throw something in my body and be like, well, somebody said that this is supposed to do this. I actually have to go look at, okay, well, who said this was supposed to do this? And what was the actual evidence that it did that? So when I look at a supplement, I'm trying to make sure that there's actual like clinical trials in humans, like controlled clinical trials with a placebo.
Right.
And a large group of people, so that I can make sure, okay, the positive effect was in a lot of people. It was a large sample size. Maybe the population was old people, and that doesn't really pertain to me, because those effects might not translate to me.
Yeah.
That happens with a lot of these like nootropic or brain boosting compounds. You see companies marketing a certain ingredient, they're like, oh, it boosted memory over X amount of time. And then you look at the actual clinical research. It's like, oh, these were 70-year-olds with mild cognitive impairment. So, if it was beneficial, then of course it's going to boost their memory a little bit, but that it's highly likely it's not going to have that kind of effect on me. Or actually somebody threw an ingredient at me yesterday. They sent me a screenshot and they're like, hey, what do you think about this? It's like a new patented ingredient. It's like, I know it's becoming relatively popular, but I already know for a fact there's no research in people, because I've already met with the company about their ingredient.
Wow.
And the only research they have is cell data. So they show that, oh, it increased BDNF, and that's a trigger word for a lot of people nowadays. So they go, oh, this supplement increases BDNF, like that's an important protein for brain health. And I'll be like, okay. So I look at the research, I'm like, oh, it did that in a petri dish. So there's no way of actually making the translation from that dose to a human dose, which is why you need to move into an animal model so you can at least do a human equivalent dose. And then if it's safe, then move into a human model. But I'm like, just because something did something in a petri dish doesn't mean it's going to happen to me. And I don't even know what dose to test it at. So I couldn't justify spending $40 on something like that. So that's the kind of stuff that I look for in ingredients. Is I just need to make sure that there's evidence they actually work.
And that's crazy. I mean, when you say stuff like that, we're purchasing things, right, that potentially, like, where are they being manufactured, and what does the science say, and are these things actually clinically tested on humans, right? There's no regulation or control, well, at least in the United States, right, where anything can kind of make it in. It's not there's no one really tightly regulating it.
Now there's a misconception that there's no regulation. Like the FDA does regulate dietary ingredients, but
yes,
you're right. Like there's a low barrier to entry.
Yes.
So things can make their way in pretty easily before, and even be on the market for maybe quite a while before really somebody takes note, and then the FDA has to put their foot down. So that does make it tough for people, specifically in the US, trying to navigate and find things that are efficacious and beneficial for them. Like I had told you, we had mentioned earlier, these ingredients that are in pre-workouts that are on the FDA warning list. But a lot of those ingredients, you can still find those very readily in supplements all over the internet. You might not be able to find them on Amazon, but they're only one Google search away, and you're not going to get penalized for buying them. You just don't know if they're going to be harmful for you or not.
Right. Wow. Yeah, crazy. That's why we're so stoked that you're jumping into the industry, doing all the research. It's super exciting. Will things like potency then, and like formula, and like looking for anything else specific? Is there anything else specific about looking at a supplement that we should really know before we're going to invest in it?
And I think there's definitely answers for that. I just know that a lot of it would be asking too much of
right.
the general person, right? Because I say, I would like to see, depending on what the ingredient is, like we talked about earlier with things like resveratrol with low bioavailability, it's cool to see things like that in nanoparticle form, which have a very high bioavailability up by a large degree. At the same time, if I told my mom, like, hey, resveratrol is good for you, you should look out for these things, like, she's not going to get it. She's just going to see, oh, resveratrol, and she's going to buy it. She's not going to know,
right,
okay, polyphenols have low bioavailability, and a nanoparticle means that it's a special delivery form where it's broken down small enough to, pass through the intestinal wall. Like, so, a lot of people aren't going to know what a liposome is. And also, like we just talked about vitamin C in a liposome, they're not going to know what kind of ingredients need them versus which ones don't. So it's really hard to ask those things of people, although that's what I look for. I don't just see like, oh, a liposome is beneficial. I want to know that certain things that need them have them. And then I also see
right.
like if other things have them that don't need them, then I might just be wasting my time with that ingredient. So those are the kinds of things that I look for off the cuff.
Yeah.
So if other people want to look into those things and understand them better, then it's wise. But at the same time, it is asking a lot from people.
Right. No, totally. Well said. I guess moving into my last question for you, and it's kind of a personal one, but like, let's say you had $50 a month to spend max, you're on a tight budget. What would be your favorite ingredient that you would purchase, or ingredients?
So this is such a boring answer. But,
everybody's like, wait for it.
I want to make sure that I have my basics covered. So I would have a quality multivitamin on hand. I would have a quality B complex with as many of the active forms of the B vitamins as I could, like methylfolate instead of folic acid, and pyridoxal 5-phosphate instead of just pyridoxine HCl in the form B6. And things of that nature. So a B vitamin, a multivitamin, vitamin D, because I take that one. I take a multivitamin twice a week. Sometimes a B vitamin 2 to 3 times a week, though lately I've been eating enough red meat that I don't think it's necessary to have it all. But vitamin D, I take regularly, because even though I live in Florida, I work at my desk all day. It's hard to get outside enough. Melatonin, because I'm wound up so tight that my sleep suffers for sure, but also melatonin has so many health benefits that I prefer to have that in with me.
Right.
Magnesium.
I need to bring you to tequila. I was going to say, I need to bring you to Mexico for some tequila.
Oh my God. I had one bad night of tequila when I was a sophomore during my undergraduate college. I had a food aversion ever since.
Ever since, you're like, no more tequila.
No, I'm a vodka drinker.
Vodka, and he's on his melatonin.
Magnesium. Magnesium's another big one. I like that one in the form of either glycinate, bisglycinate, or taurate. There's not a whole lot of difference between those. They all work relatively well. It's just the differences in what they're attached to. But those ones are all highly bioavailable.
Wow.
And I believe that's it. There's five of them. Yeah. If I had $50 a month, then that's what I would get: a multivitamin, a B complex, magnesium, melatonin. Did I say another one? Oh, you know what? A fish oil, a quality fish oil.
Quality fish oil.
So those five. Yeah. And I actually prefer fish oil, and I like a mixture of fish and krill.
Right. Okay. And what do you prefer? What's your preferred potency for EPA, DHA a day?
I like to personally get around, I don't worry so much about EPA because it kind of falls in where it needs to if they're together. But I like getting anywhere from 2 to 3 grams of DHA a day if I can.
Wow. Okay.
That's a relatively high amount. So for most people, 1 to 2 grams of DHA at a minimum. I think 2 is recommended.
Right. Okay. Oh my goodness. So awesome. Wow. Thank you. So many wisdom drops tonight. Very, very valuable, Will. And thank you for joining us. Incredible. My brain is spinning. I want to open it up to, if anybody has any questions that was here, wants to ask Will anything, drop your questions below in the comment box here. And do stay tuned. I'm gonna have the we're also recording here, so I'm gonna have the video edited, and I will share it again, because I know I had my notebook out. There was a lot of really exciting information dropped. So if you missed anything, I'm gonna post it next month. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Does anyone have any questions? I had somebody asking earlier a few things, but I think we actually covered everything. Someone saying favorite sleep tracker. No, just track your sleep yourself. I don't know. I don't track. Do you track your sleep, Will?
I don't use a sleep. I don't have an Oura ring or anything like that. No.
No, me either. Sorry, we're not. Will and I aren't sleep tracker app people. Lifestyle, Sammy Joe. I know that everyone is different, but what's one of your top sups for muscle growth?
Top sups for muscle growth. Okay. So that one's tricky, because I also, I have pretty extensive knowledge of like androgen use and like the biochemistry of androgens.
Androgens.
Never used one, but I was just always fascinated by how they worked. So legally, what's the top supplement for muscle growth? I can tell you off the cuff that,
what country are you in?
yeah, legally, there's not going to be a whole lot, unfortunately. However,
Food.
well, protein, yeah, that'd be number one. There are some interesting things. I don't know if this supplement's even on the market anymore, because I know that there was a study came out actually last year showing that there's basically a plant hormone from spinach. It's called ecdysterone. It's actually a phytoestrogen, and it works on the estrogen receptor. And in a concentrated form, there was a significant amount of muscle gain in males that used it compared to males that didn't. The problem is that if you were to just eat spinach to get the necessary amount of this compound, you'd have to eat 13 pounds of spinach a day. So it looks like Popeye was onto something, but at the same time, it's not very practical. It was called ecdysterone, and I know that there are a couple ecdysterone supplements on the market, but they're not the full active version. And I think as soon as that study came out, I'm pretty sure that sporting agencies were kind of all over that and flagged it as something that athletes shouldn't be taking. So that was interesting, but I don't think that was going to be practical for a lot of people to get, because A, I don't think a lot of people know about it, and B, the ones that are on the market, they just don't have the appropriate dosing. But
right.
I'll tell you one thing that might be cool. It has, at least mechanistically, it makes sense. And in animals, it's showing pretty cool things in muscle growth. And they're called specialized pro-resolving mediators. And this is actually what the premise of my dissertation is about. And these are actually like bioactive lipids that are actually made from omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 as well. The problem is just taking more omega-3s doesn't increase the amount of precursor substrate for these pro-resolving mediators, because there's so many different pathways that use omega-3s that they're always in competition. And these things the pro-resolving mediators are kind of made as they're needed. And then basically what they do is they are the resolution of inflammation. So everybody knows that when you work out, you trigger inflammation. And that inflammation, I don't know if everybody knows this, but it's more common knowledge nowadays, that you don't want to block that inflammation, because the inflammation is sending signals for muscle growth to take place, which is why probably taking things like NSAIDs is not very beneficial for muscle growth, because you're just straight off shutting off the signal for muscle growth. So the inflammation signals for these pro-resolving mediators, and they actually come in and they start to clear out all the inflammatory proteins and basically start it's called the resolution phase, where cellular repair and remodeling happens. And in mice, if you just give them these pro-resolving mediators, after damaging their skeletal muscle, they're actually showing increased satellite cell activity, increased muscle growth, and things of that nature. And it's happening without blocking the inflammation. So rather than block it, you resolve it. And so those show promise. I can't promise that that's going to work in humans. And even if it did, I don't know what the dose would be. But I do know that the company that I work for, Life Extension, we had released, it's called SPM. SPMs is what they're called, but specialized pro-resolving mediators. And we had released a soft gel toward the end of last year on the market. So those are available, and not a lot of people know about those. And the research is still in its pretty early stages, because they were only recently discovered. But there's a lot of promise for those. So I've actually been testing with myself post-workout, not immediately, but the night after I work out, taking an SPM pill, and just seeing if I see any anecdotes in my recovery or my strength or whatever. Because, I like to track those things and know if I'm improving or if I'm just wasting my time in the gym. So, that's something different. Outside of that, your obvious things like protein and creatine to facilitate muscle growth, but the SPMs are something novel you know, that somebody might like to hear if they were looking for something new.
Wow, crazy to think you're thinking about that inflammatory response, not actually directly like a creatine or protein, which is directly impacting the muscle, right? Like it's that's totally exciting, something new. SPMs, is that right, Will?
Yep.
Okay, Sammy Joe, I hope that helps. That's super cool. Check out, and I know Sammy Joe's in Canada. Life Extension's very alive up there and well. So check it out. See what you can. What is that specific supplement called, Will, or is it just SPM, or is it something different?
Specialized Pro Resolve.
Okay, sweet. Wow, thank you so much, value and wisdom, and there's just a ton of information you shared with us tonight. I'm so honored in your extremely busy schedule that you set aside the time tonight to join me and to join all of us and to share. Thank you, Will, so much. It's been such an honor, and it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
No, it was my pleasure.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Keep crushing it. Will, so happy for you. You've got, I know, 8 months left, and then look out. Look out. Will be out on the ground running. So awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for all your feedback as well, your comments, and have an awesome night. Bye everyone.